Welcome to Reunite with Self podcast. I'm your host, Rukan. Here, we will be discovering and unraveling what is truly holding you back. We will put the puzzle together and give you clarity on how and what you can do to create massive shift in your life so you start creating the life you always envisioned for yourself. There is no more waiting. Whether it is liberating from dysfunctional family patterns or parenting tools and tips that actually make the difference, we will be diving into the truth and core of things that are simple and which yet no one talks about. I will be sharing with you all the things that would have changed my life massively if I heard any one of these episodes. A new world is awakening, and true bliss, harmony, and peace is possible on this earth. And my mission is to bring you closer to that, one step at a time. In this safe space, I will hold your hand and give you courage and certainty that you can shift anything and everything in your life. It is time we break the pattern. Whether you want to be the parent you never had or make a shift in your life so you don't play small any longer, you will find the support and guidance in this space. My intention is for you to find answers within yourself while you listen to this podcast, so you feel the bliss of reuniting with your true essence, with self, with so much love and compassion and courage. From my heart to yours, let's keep it rockin'. My gorgeous listener, welcome to another episode on Reunite with Self. I am so happy that you are here because this is going to be a special episode where I will benefit from a lot as well. I tend to, as I'm contemplating on things while I'm doing the podcast, although I prepare a little bit, like I wrote notes today, and I will read them to you. But although I take notes and I prepare, I always come up with different things while I am in this space of being a channel. Like my intention is always to be a channel of truth while I am doing my podcasts, both of them, the Turkish and the English one, and you're listening to the English one. And really, while I am talking about things, I tend to realize many truths about why I feel a certain way about some things, or what I truly went through, or what can be the solutions, why I feel better when I do certain things. So today we're going to talk about how does fawning look like in any relationship. This can be family, romantic, friendships, workspace. And where does fawning truly come from? By the way, if you don't know what fawning is, and I didn't clearly know what it meant until very recently, we're going to talk about what fawning is and where it comes from and what are the other stress traumas and all the things. And in all honesty, in a very manifesting generator fashion, I have been filming myself in the intro, and now it's done. And now I've got my AC on, and now I am in the groove to record this episode. So, as you may know, we always talked about, like, we knew 3 trauma responses. The response that you do, let's say, automatically, or what feels familiar to you, or what just comes out of you automatically when you are in conflict or in a challenging moment were 3 things that we knew. It's all the F's. It's fight, flight, or freeze. This is what we knew. And I think fawning is like very recent that we discovered, like there is this different type of behavior that we can classify as like something else, because it doesn't really fall into any of the other trauma responses, and it's a huge trauma response, and it gets you in more trouble as you just continue fawning with, let's say, someone who has a narcissistic tendency, or even if they don't, it's just not healthy attachment. It's not healthy bonding. So it doesn't matter if the person in front of you is healthy or not, or has good intentions or not, or whatever, fawning is not healthy. And let's talk about all of this. So fight, flight, or freeze were the trauma responses that we knew, and they all come from childhood, by the way. And it's just how you react to a situation when there is conflict, when there is challenging emotions like arising from you. And people usually tend to have a couple or mainly one. Like myself, I would say, and now we know what fawn is. I would say I have freeze for sure, like the main one from my childhood, early adulthood. It's the highest one that I would get when in conflict with someone who has narcissistic tendency. Freeze is the first one. And I can talk about this on another episode, but flight for me is not that common. And if I can't do anything with freeze, like if I still feel that I'm in danger, then I would go to fight, but it did not happen a lot. Maybe a little bit in my romantic relationships when I was like in extreme abuse, I would do fight, but normally it's not like my go-to, let's say. And I'm still a recovering abuse survivor. I will always recover like throughout my life, but I know that in the last 2 years, I have created a lot of clarity on what really went down and what it was causing me in my life. Like huge, huge stuff that I'm still working through to build my foundations really from scratch. Like I am working on all areas of my life and all areas in these areas of my life, really working from scratch to, because I am the foundation. And if I am working from a centered place, then I start creating my incredible life. And I've just started the journey, but I will be recovering my whole life. Like I'm learning every single day. But fawning is something that is really high in my trauma response. In that spectrum, like I fall into freeze and fawn a lot. And this is really sad. Like when you think about someone, a child, like an innocent child, or a baby, I think this is very common in narcissistic abuse. But I have seen in my life who has narcissistic tendencies who are maybe abused by narcissists, and their response is like whenever they get a challenging emotion, and it doesn't need to be a challenging moment, by the way, like for you, it's like a natural moment, but for them, they get triggered and they might become really aggressive, like fight or flight. And then if you are a narcissistic survivor as well, and if you are like not narcissistic, if you have like compassion and empathy, and if you're highly sensitive, you might fall into the other trauma responses. Like it really depends on the situation and the moment. So let's talk about fawn. Like fawning is, let me read you. I just Googled it before recording and this was beautiful, very clear. So I want to read it to you. Fawning refers to consistently abandoning your own needs to serve others to avoid conflict, criticism, or disapproval. Like this, I have this huge. And you know, as I'm learning these things, I see clearly what I was doing in survival mode in order to survive, like how I was being and behaving in certain moments or around certain people in a pattern. Like it makes me almost want to cry because you see that you do things that does not fulfill you, like how you behave that way, and it becomes such a huge pattern. And I'm talking about this in like holiday season for many people in the world. And you might be around your family more than usual, and I just want to say, like, I see you, I hear you, I'm with you. If you are having any challenges, it's very natural. And the more I think we grow, when we are growing wiser, we start understanding how we're not even feeling good at all around certain people, like in maybe certain relative circles, like around relatives, certain people, certain family dynamics. We're actually not ourselves. And what we do in a pattern unconsciously is like does not fulfill us, and it's actually a trauma response. And this has been a pattern maybe since you were a baby, a child, and it was some behavior that you have been repeating because you just learned it or you copied from others around you, but you mainly do it from like your inner voice. Like if you're empathic, compassionate, you find a way to survive, a way to survive around people who has narcissistic tendencies, and you just keep repeating the same pattern around them without realizing. And then as you get wiser and more conscious, and when you start like changing things about your life, or when you even have the total clarity of what went down and how you want to change your life, you might get triggered, you might feel in that moment, you might start realizing the ickiness of the moment, like how you are actually not how you would behave in another table where there is healthy people that want to see you, hear you. I think those moments are very valuable. They are very, very powerful if you are just willing to look at it, because like when you get out of the situation, you can have even more clarity around like what really went down and how you were coping with the trauma or with the abuse, or with basically the abuse. I don't want to say the challenge because I'm talking about unhealthy dynamics, unhealthy abuse that was happening to you. There is no healthy abuse, but like abuse happening to you and how you were coping with it as a child. And then what you can realize is that in the last 1 year mainly, and even like very recently, I've been seeing how I have been like what caused that much trauma in my life, in my past romantic relationships and situationships and everything. What was truly like how I was behaving, how it was like where there was no love, like lack of love in true sense, what I was doing and what was repeating. Like everything comes from family. Everything comes from family. And you just keep on doing the same things in a different way because that person makes you feel the same way as one of your parents did, or both, or different ways your both parents did. So fawning is, I'll read this again. Fawning refers to consistently abandoning your own needs to serve others to avoid conflict, criticism, or disapproval. We're going to make this more clear. It says fawning is also called please and appease response and is associated with people pleasing and codependency. And we're going to go dive deeper into this to make it more clear. How it looks like in real life, like in practice. And I wrote this as well. Fawn types seek safety by merging with the wishes, needs, and demands of others. This is so true of my story, and I can see clearly how it was playing out in my family dynamics and how it translated into the romantic relationships arena in my life, like how I was behaving around narcissistic people. Because, when you are like with your intuition, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. If you had narcissistic abuse, and if you are on the spectrum of like, compassionate, empathic, not a narcissist coming out of a narcissist, like that's not your choice. Your choice is to be empathic, compassionate. And you're really seeking true love, and you're there, present, empathic, compassionate, all the things. I think in the first couple of seconds that that person has a narcissistic tendency, but you don't say it like that in your mind because you don't even know that you come from both parents or one parent that has narcissistic tendency. You don't know that. You haven't clarified that yet. And so there is this example that, if they put 100, whatever you look for in a relationship, man or woman, whatever they put like 100, if you're a woman, they put 100 men in front of you and you're heterosexual, you prefer men, and they put 100 men in front of you, you're going to go and choose the one that is going to be so abusive just as your parent or both parents or whatever the dynamics are in your greater family, like relatives dynamics, all the things. But you're going to go pick the one, your subconscious, if you are not in your true healing journey, if you haven't identified that you have this thing in your life from your family and that you have to like make huge changes in your life, like healthy boundaries, what that person is doing is not healthy, what they're saying is not the truth, how it has been truly like keeping you playing small and not get the things that your heart wishes and not create your incredible life. If you haven't clarified this yet, that it's not about you, it's that about the other person and their actions, your subconscious will go and pick the one that is going to be as, I don't want to curse, like as effed up. They're not going to do the same things, most probably. If you're intelligent, like I think it depends on your intelligence because you might put the puzzle together too fast. Let's say if you have an alcoholic parent and then you pick an alcoholic partner, or if there was gambling and you pick someone who was gambling, or someone was physically beating you up and you're going to go for someone that's going to start hitting you the first day. No, it's going to play out very differently. And what your partner, your ex, I hope, will do to you is going to be very different. The story will be so different. They will do things that actually maybe your narcissistic parent would not do to you. Like maybe that would be their, that would be the space that they would not enter. But because they're so different, your mind cannot cope, like your ego cannot truly see, your logic doesn't pick up the pattern so fast. And so I think it's about it depends on your intelligence as well. Not that you're like smarter than other people, but just it depends on how complex you think. It has to be so hidden. Subconscious works this way. It has to be so hidden that what they're doing to you, the story has to be very different from your family dynamics. And in my situation, in my past romantic life, I was attracting people that were abusive, and the abuse got bigger and bigger, but the people seemed like it did not seem as if it was going to be that complex abuse. And of course, the story is always different, but what I want to say is that how they make you feel is exactly the same. I'm not talking about all the exes. I'm talking about the parent or the family member who has the narcissistic tendency. It's usually not one person in the family, by the way. Like if it's just one parent, it has to go to maybe another sibling, maybe to an aunt, an uncle, a cousin. Like it has to be more than one. It's usually not one person. They're like characteristics, personalities might be completely different, and the way they tend to be narcissistic can be completely different, but it's usually not just one person. And how they make you feel. So when we talk about the romantic relationships, how they make you feel is exactly the same. The feeling, the unworthiness, the not feeling not enough. Although you're just fine being you, but they make you feel as if there is something really really messed up about you, that you're not worthy, that you are not enough, that there is something wrong with you, that your reactions, like you're delusional, you're crazy, whatever it is. The stories are different, how the parent did it and how the romantic partner would do. And I don't want to go deeper into this in this episode because we can do another one in this, but I just want to say I always like to say this because it took me so long to realize all this stuff. Like, if I have the privilege to talk to you, I have to say this just as one person might need to hear it, and maybe 2 days later, they're going to start putting the puzzle together. Oh, maybe like this is not about the romantic relationship. Maybe this is calling me to lean in, to see things about my parents that are not just bothering me today, but what really went down in the past that is holding me back from my great romantic life partner. Like, what's holding me back from that is what went down in the past. So I always like to remind you the stories are different, to keep it hidden so that it can continue. Your inner child want to prove something to you, and you can be there for him or her and see what happens, and you can make changes now. And it's gonna reflect on your romantic relationships as a result. So you don't even need to focus so much on the romantic relationships first. You can focus on your parental everything, the family stuff. And the romantic relationships will be a result of that. Like you going into healthier territories and meeting new people, meeting very different people, and, meeting the love of your life is what my intention for you would be. So fawning is, I want to go deeper into like what it looks like. So fawn types seek safety by merging with the wishes, needs, and demands of others. I want to keep on reading all of this and then talk about it. I also wrote, this is all from Google. I like these, so I wrote them down because it's clear and it's going to be easier for me to explain everything. Fawning it says displaying exaggerated flattery or affection. It doesn't have to be just this, but it was a description of fawning. And it also says what triggers fawning is childhood abuse. Physical, emotional, or sexual abuse experienced during childhood can lead to the development of fawning to appease the abuser to avoid further harm. Yes, so this is what I want to talk about. So fawning is a sign that you did not feel safe as a child around a parent, whoever had narcissistic tendency. It is a sign that you did not feel safe around this person, that any moment they will do whatever they would do, criticize, like disrespect you as a human being, shame, like really put you in whatever hell they liked to do as a pattern. And in order to cope with this and in order to feel safe as a child, you might start doing the things that you think that they will, one, approve maybe, but in the least, not even approve, like in the least, that they will not see you as a target in that moment and keep on doing what they have been doing or what you think they might do in a situation. Just because they're bothered, not because you're doing something. Just like human behavior is so interesting to me. Like it's one of the great mysteries of the universe to me. And that's like, of course, obviously, I'm so passionate to talk about all of this stuff. But when you look at a circle, I wish it was a circle, but it was like relatives sitting together, you might see the tendencies of some people serving and the others getting. Serving in as I mean emotionally. And maybe it's like, I'm just, for example, maybe women are acting in a way that men will not see as too sharp. So meaning that women are not really being totally as themselves, not like fully showing up, not like sitting in a way that, I am here, I am light, and I am me. I am proud of being me. I just love myself and I am here. Just like being centered and shining and not playing small. Maybe they're not doing that, and instead they're appeasing the narcissistic tendency individuals. By the way, like not every women are like this. Like I have a lot of women and men who have high narcissistic tendencies in my family. But just as you look, and by the way, that the narcissist is abused by the narcissist. So not all of them are like innocent. But when you look at people and the abusers, let's say, and it doesn't have to be like, like crazy extreme behavior. Like in my world, it does not need to be that way to be extremely powerful on others. But you might see some people acting in a way like making jokes, like playing small, even maybe being sarcastic, but really keeping themselves so small and like walking around the territory that is safe, that has been walked before. And they know those jokes or those comments or those conversations will not trigger the narcissist to do something. Or maybe if it's something about the narcissist that people are talking about, like if the conversation is about the person who is narcissistic, highly narcissistic, maybe the others are talking in a way that is going to appease, like please that person. So they're not going to do something, to say anything all of a sudden. That's how they do it, to make you feel not good enough. It can be something really, really tiny, by the way. I always like to keep repeating this so you don't minimize any of your emotions. Because if you feel like there is something effed up in that moment, there is. So fawning can look like if you are in a conversation with a person who has a narcissistic tendency, they might be talking about something, news, weather, work, career, I don't know, like how people do what they do, whatever it is, or something about themselves, what they did. And of course, they need the clapping and the applause. Like, of course, they need some kind of approval that they are on the right track, whether if they're having a problem with something or whatever. But if you had been narcissistic, if you had narcissistic abuse, if you'd been abused by a narcissist, you know exactly. And if it's someone that comes like that is from your family, you know exactly what they want to hear. And you tend to look at where they look at just to be safe. You look at things the way they would not feel confrontation with you. Like they would not feel, oh, like he or she is being too much here. I'm not able to deal with this. This is too challenging for me. Their opinions are being too much. This is how like the narcissist subconscious sees the world. And those are the moments that if they feel a little bit like you're being too much of yourself, that's where they put you down with. They don't even need to say anything directly to you. If they've created the wound, they can do something so small. And if it's in your family circle, like certain behaviors are so paternal, like, I don't know, they're such in a pattern that you know exactly what's okay to say and what's not. By the way, like it's crap, it's bullshit. But this is how it works. You look at what they look at and make it sound like so interesting, whereas it's like BS for you. It's not even interesting to talk about. Or you give them what they you give them what they should give to you, or what you are so thirsty for. Things like support, approval. You can think about your own situations. My examples are not important. I don't want to go into too many examples, by the way, because this stuff is so... When you're tuned into your own story, it is so, what's the word? It is so subtle. And there's another word that I can't remember, but it's so subtle and it's so nuanced is the word. It has a nuance that does not need any kind of logical explanation. If you're talking to a safe person, they would understand right away. Like, you don't need to explain the mimic and where that story actually came from and how they used to do what they were used to do, like for 20 years. Like, you don't need to say any of that. They understand. And I think this brings me to my next episode topic for sure, that I wanted to remember to record an episode on. Okay, let's continue. So you might look at things that they're looking at. You might say things. Oh, this is so common. You might say things as if it's of interest to you, and it's actually not. Or that's not how you look at the world. That's not where the solution is for you. And if they're going through any challenge, or if they have accomplished something, like, something small maybe, or they are going for that accomplishment, whatever it is, you are supporting them, like saying the exact things that they should have been saying to you for the past 20 years, but they never do. And that's how they keep you in the loop. But just so that they don't attack you, you do the exact things in the hope that you're going to have a healthy attachment with them one day. Without, like, this is not conscious, this is subconscious. But you can bring all of this to your consciousness, and you can make great change. So you are not accommodating anything, you are not accommodating. Fawning can look like, what can we give an example here? Just like to avoid further harm. Maybe they have harmed you in that moment. They have said something that is not acceptable about you. They have put you down, criticized you, extremely, like, shamed you. But criticizing is huge for narcissists, as you should well know. When they do something like this, for them not to go even further, for them not to hurt you any further, for them not to make you bleed any further, because it's like it hurts a lot in those moments. And for them not to go any further, you do something that looks like you're playing small so that they don't go any further. And this is something so, like, I can do episodes after episodes about this. This is something so familiar to me. As a child, you understand that the depths of where they will go, and your fawning doesn't stop them from going there, by the way. But sometimes, in just some small moments, you don't become the bet in that moment. You don't become the target. Just sometimes you get away from their goal, where they're looking at. Sometimes their attention goes to something else, and you get away with less, I don't want to say less pain, but just not further damage, and it doesn't go to an even more extreme place. Just for that, you learn doing this. And this becomes a pattern, how you behave around these people. And as an adult now, if it's your holiday season, and you're maybe spending more time around your relatives and family, you can be more open to looking at this with no judgment for yourself, with so much compassion, because these are all results of like big abuse, not small, like big, happening in a pattern over and over and over again that really causes something. And you can change all of this, by the way. In order to change all of it, we need to be very clear about it. Then it becomes a matter of like a moment that you make a change, like that you make a decision that whenever it happens again, you don't do the same thing. You might do it for one meal or moment or, I don't know, a couple of hours, but then you come back to yourself and then you might do something different. But fawning is a sign that you did not feel safe as a child. What are the other examples? So yeah, to avoid further harm, you might say something even to confirm their they're minimizing about you. Like they might say something to disempower you, something very disempowering, something that is so not true, that is so far away from the truth, that is not the truth, that is so disempowering, that is not acceptable, but you might even just approve that in order to get away with at least that much harm, you would tell yourself. And I even have like experiences like this. This is a good example as well that I don't hear a lot of people talk about this. When someone does something to you that hurt you and you truly, like there is an apology that is necessary. And if you feel the courage because you've been healing, whatever, you now feel the courage to speak up and say something about it and express yourself. Doesn't matter if the person you're talking to has a narcissistic tendency or not. And if they have a little bit of narcissistic tendency, when you tell them you did this, like when you said this, I felt this, or whenever you would say this in a pattern, I always felt this, a challenging emotion. A healthy person would respond with like total understanding, like acceptance without your further explanation, clear, sincere apology, and like just being present there and being fully accountable and all the things. Like they do magic things, healthy people. But if you're talking to someone who might have any narcissistic tendency, when you tell them, when you speak up for the first time, and it's not in a fight mode, by the way, your trauma response is not fight. You're just like centered in telling them how you felt. The way they start responding to you, this is so familiar to me, by the way. And I think I had an experience like this recently and I stopped myself and I want to remember this. I remember one incident that is very recent, but there was something else that happened that I want to remember. But I stopped myself because the way they start responding to you, you know, in your gut, like, you know, deep down, because you're so used to the narcissistic abuse and how they behave and act, that I would say something and I need to wait for their apology. But the way they would start talking about something, I would, oh yeah, I remember what it was about. Like playing small just to not get more hurt. Because if they have narcissistic tendency, when you tell them, express them how they feel, what they will say back to you will hurt you even deeper. And I'm sure you're very familiar with this if you have narcissistic tendency in your family, which I'm sure you do if you're listening to this podcast, or you're maybe thinking I might have. So the way they start talking to you, the way they start responding, you know, deep down, they're not going to apologize. They're not going to be accountable. They will not be willing to understand you. They will not be willing to see and hear you. That's not like, that should be the goal. Especially if it's something about your own life, the conversation, if it's something about your life, they are not going to be like accountable, and they're not going to be accountable for the fact that they're like overcrossing your boundary. And in order not to be like, these are the words that I found that it's so true, that to avoid conflict, criticism, or disapproval or rejection, you might add anything else. Because, and I can do another episode just on this, but when someone who is empathic, compassionate, when they speak up, it's usually after the same thing happening for a very long time over and over again. And when they feel the courage to speak up and say something and express themselves, it's usually after a lot of pain. And in that moment, the narcissist has no interest to see the other person. They're about like, they run with shame. So their system like functions so much with shame, like very hidden shame they run away from. So the fact that they might do a mistake or something, like they're not going to just accept that they've made a mistake. It's easy for a healthy person. But for someone who has narcissistic tendency, it's not easy for them. So they won't be so interested to see you and hear you. And so the way they start responding to you, this is so familiar to me. I would normally play small and make their excuses okay and just let them get away with it, not to, air quotes, make it a big deal. Because I believed that from my past, that if I made a big deal about it, I was, quote unquote, making a big deal about it. Like, I was not making a big deal. What I was doing was something necessary. But what I was taught that was like, being too much, making a big deal, whereas it means you're just being yourself and like showing up for yourself and protecting yourself and shining your light. Like, you just existing is too much for the narcissist. So this was a very big tendency for me that I know I'm still healing. It doesn't have to be an apology, by the way. The example I remembered was not an apology. I will probably make another episode just based on that experience, because I am like realizing and learning so much in this journey, which I'm very grateful for. So I'm going to continue reading a little bit more. Oh yeah. So I read this. There was a video that I didn't watch, but I wrote the title, which is so related to what we've been talking about. So fawning is a trauma response that leaves you vulnerable to bad treatment. Exactly. So that's why all my past romantic relationships, bad treatments all the way through. This is very familiar to me, but it was familiar because of all the family stuff. And fawn response is this stress response, it says, often observed in individuals who have experienced narcissistic abuse or trauma, involves attempts to appease the abuser to avoid harm or gain approval, and is rooted in a deep-seated need to maintain and minimize conflict. This is all like, it makes me want to cry, really, because when you think of yourself as a child, when you look at a child, you were once a child just like that. And just like in order to, just where it says individuals who have experienced narcissistic abuse or trauma, involves attempts to appease the abuser to avoid harm or further harm, is rooted in a deep-seated need to maintain and minimize conflict. And I think it's to add, is rooted in a deep-seated need to have safety, any kind of safety, because it's not just about you being criticized when you're a child. It's like life or death. Like, are you worthy to live? Am I going to be here tomorrow? Like, are you worthy of being loved? And that attachment is like life and death for you. And I also read this that I remember now that makes so much sense. Our two deepest needs as a child is attachment and individuality, like authenticity. And the fawning person, the person who has the fawning response, tends to choose attachment because it's instead of authenticity, they have to make a choice in the face of a narcissist. So this is just it's really sad to me thinking about this stuff, because so many people are going through a lot of things in this very moment. So you choose attachment in that moment, and the sad part is you don't even have a clear, like, healthy attachment in that moment. You just want to survive. And so narcissistic tendency in families, the family you come from, in parents, causes really, really deep, what we call like toxic relationships in your adult life, for sure. If you had any toxic relationships in the past, or maybe you are in one today where it's very challenging for you, I would kindly tell you to look at your family stuff for sure. That's where it comes from. Like, I would have no doubt about it, but it might be so hidden. You might even think that you've solved the stuff about your family, but there are still things that you need to see clearly that you did not deserve, that happened to you. And it's now just as a sign coming to your life to scream out loud, like, look at what you can tolerate, look at what you can pick and tolerate and stay with, because this is what you are familiar with and what was taught to you as love, or what was exemplified as love, and what was expected from you to stay in and just be okay with and fawn in. So I hope you had some takeaways from this episode. I don't want to leave the episode on a bad note. I don't think we are, but it's just a lot of stuff that we walk through, that we talk about, like deep stuff, and we can do hard things. And this is the reason that I do this podcast. And the reason I do this podcast is, like, imagine if we can have these discussions more in our, like, with our friends, in our circles, like, even if it's one person in your life, then life gets so miraculous, because then you take up more space in your life. Then you are fine to take up more space. You are fine with creating healthy boundaries that are super challenging for you, but you just keep on being on your path. You don't get, like, sidetracked. You don't self-sabotage. You don't let someone else to sabotage you. You just play full out. You keep on being in your path, although it might get really challenging. And on the other side of it, miracles await you. Always. Miracles always await you when you do things really out of your comfort zone. And your comfort zone might be the things that really deeply hurt you and wound you. And you don't need to wait in that space for things to change. You can actually make a huge shift in your life yourself. I love you so much. I will see you on the next episode. My gorgeous listener, if you had any takeaways from this episode or from this podcast in general, I would love to know. Please share this episode with a few loved ones right now. You never know how they can benefit from something so small. And please take a screenshot of this episode and share on IG, tagging me at Khewela. That is Khewella. Khewela. That is my goddess wear brand, my Instagram page. I would love to know what your takeaway was, or something you found inspirational, or a confirmation you believe in as well. That would make my day. And you can always DM me if you have a topic or a certain question in mind that you want me to talk about. And give me a 5-star rating if you feel like it. That would help this podcast immensely to get the word out. I love you. See you on the next one. I want to see you shine your brightest.